folks, Corky Dude Farminator here. Come with me if you want to call. This is Farming Simulator 22, Silverrun, Forrest, Woody Johnson Farm, Part 14. Okay.
But it's also because they're trying to keep information from you
now,
at home.
I figured something out, and I was right because I was guessing.
What's going on?
But I haven't bought this boat launch yet. If I do, when I throw materials in there to make the boat, it won't pay me if I buy it. So I'm not going to buy it, which is. Well, I don't have enough money.
If Donald Trump didn't kick out the Associated
Press, 125. Right. So I'm not going to buy it.
The jokes are funny. If Donald Trump's DOJ didn't go knock on Tyler Pedro's door,
when I put materials in it, I can get paid for it.
Facts. When he got an award last night, the jokes would be funny if these attacks on journalists weren't actually leading to actual action.
Right. And I think, presidents have always had problems with the press. Every administration has had its troubles with reporters. They've had concerns about information they don't want leaked to reporters getting out to the public. This is entirely different, and the ways in which Donald Trump and his administration are cracking down on the press are totally unprecedented. I think a great example is what's happening at the Pentagon right now. Yeah. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was in the audience last night. There's a war going on in Iran. The U.S. is engaged in a war in Iran, and we haven't had a press briefing since
YouTube,
May.
how you doing?
That is extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm building a boat.
He first took over,
I'm just not going to buy the boatyard.
Basically purged all real reporters.
But yeah, I've already started building a boat. You can see the skeleton of it.
That you have officials
right there.
Members who don't understand the value of the free
got 60 more hours left before the first phase go.
I do want to circle back to when we come back.
You got to get some more prefab shelters out of there.
The conversation about the Pentagon, because there's more alarming news there.
How you doing? Thanks for joining the street.
Sticking with us. The conversation will continue after the break, where we've got brand new reporting with my colleague Dick Traylor. This is that Trump now favors J.D. Vance as his heir apparent. It's got some weighty details you don't want to miss. You're watching The Weekend. Has unofficially chosen a successor to take over as president in 2028, at least for now. New reporting from myself and MS Now's Jake Traylor details how Trump has been treating Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio like rival contestants, and polling aides and donors on how the two men stack up as presidential contenders against each other. But in recent weeks, the president seems to be warming up to the idea of Vance as the 2028 nominee. As we reported, people familiar with Trump's shift pointed to a specific inflection point: Vance's press tour for his new memoir. The vice president has received a mostly warm reception in recent appearances on The View, Real Time with Bill Maher, Trump's favorite network Fox News, and even Megyn Kelly's podcast. It was that stretch, Vance holding his own in semi-hostile terrain while carrying the administration's message that caught the president's attention, as people said. Plus, it hasn't hurt that Trump has been privately complimentary about Vance's weight loss. That's according to two people familiar with his comments. Aidan McLaughlin and Von Hilliard are back with us. And I will also just add that RFK and some others in the administration have spoken rather publicly about this fermented food-heavy diet that a lot of the cabinet members are on.
It has a lot of sauerkraut.
Yeah, sauerkraut heavy.
Sounds disgusting.
But what I do love about this story that Jake and I worked on, Aiden, is just like the Trumpology of it all, right? His tendency and his history of pitting people against one another in his orbit, even his children. Of course, he would do that with J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, and then also the TV news consumption and the appearance part of this equation. I mean, can you talk a little bit about what you think will go into what ultimately drives Trump to make a final decision on who he's going to support in 2028?
Well, yeah, it's incredible reporting, and it's amazing because only Donald Trump could select his successor to be president on the basis of an appearance on The View and part of an extended book tour while serving as vice president.
While he was, by the way, at the G7,
well, he was
watching these appearances.
Right, and during a hot war with Iran, Like, it is extraordinary. Like, it's easy to forget that this is a book tour that the vice president is going on while he's serving as vice president. I was surprised to read this reporting, if only because I thought the common wisdom was that Rubio was performing better than Vance, if only because Rubio was avoiding the intractable negotiations to end the war in Iran. When J.D. Vance was getting in a bust-up with the Pope, it was Marco Rubio who went over to the Vatican to smooth things over, and it seemed like his star was really rising. And I think what the reporting goes to show is that Trump is a very, very different metric for what he sees as success. And it's clear, I think it's media appearances, it's the ability to be combative with the press and still drive headlines, and it's also fealty. Key.
I think one of the things Jackie said in the piece is that this is a snapshot in time, right? Like, this is right now. And this is how, how people like...
Caveat.
Right?
Evergreen caveat.
Yes. So do you know how people like me, how they say polling is a snapshot in time and it doesn't predict the future? That's how I feel about this story. I think somebody here, or maybe in the break, we were talking about how it feels like an episode of The Apprentice to a way. And so I guess my question for you,
J.D. Vance actually said that himself.
Did he really? And so, Bob, I guess my question for you is, if you are J.D. Vance or his team, and
Hey, Jody, how you doing? Thanks for joining the stream.
Have Trump's backing through, the early parts of 2028. Who are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Worried about as a potential challenger for the Republican nomination?
Donald Trump. I mean that seriously, and it's more Don Jr. I think that this is a moment where the reporting was great and brilliant because J.D. Vance is somebody that the president also maintains effective control over. And I think that is what is illuminating, is that effectively he's been able to make his way through 1.5 years of this administration. Mike Pence almost made it 4. And yet, if you go back to Don Jr. being the one that effectively helped promote and get him selected, essentially that was a head nod to J.D. Vance, is that you report to one family, and that family is the Trump family.
Right.
And that at any point you lose the support of this family, your political relevance within this party is over here. And so Marco Rubio has already said that he won't run if J.D. Vance decided to run. He'll let me open. I mean, there's other Republicans that can run, but there's no reason to believe that anybody else has that staying power outside of the Trump family. And whoever the Trump family gives their nod to at this point in time, Trump's endorsements continue to win. And until they don't, I have a hard time believing voters are really possible.
And Trump likes to look like a winner, even if when he's endorsing folks, right? So we've seen over and over the last months in these primaries, he endorses on something, and the people are voting on Tuesday. That's exactly really making moves here, right? And I think, and that's not thinking about 2020 Republicans at the end of the day, is that Donald Trump is going to hold his public endorsement. He's obviously telling folks that he's liking what JD's doing right now, but he's going to hold it until the possible last moment. Because at the end of the day, he's going to look to see what the voters are. He's going to see, especially what the ecosystem on the right is. I think at the end of the day, Donald Trump is going to back whoever is going to not even look like an heir apparent to him, just looks like a winner. Right? At the end of the day, am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I think on that point, when you look at polling, and if we're just looking at J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio polls better than J.D. Vance amongst the Americans.
He's not charming. That's good.
Where Marco Rubio does not poll better than J.D. Vance is among Trump's base.
Right.
Because they still remember him as the, establishment Republican
Gang of Eight.
who was on the debate stage with Donald Trump, arguing about the size of their mandate.
Yeah.
And so they don't forget that. And in fact, I spoke to someone who's part of Donald Trump's political operation who said that part of the reason they think that has staying power, and J.D. Vance's comments about Trump criticizing him do not, or have less staying power amongst the base, is that one was on video and one wasn't. So it may ultimately be that Rubio finds the biggest challenge that he faces is Donald Trump's base because of those debates back in 2016. And I think that is something that really favors J.D. Vance in a potential matchup in 2028.
Despite all of the fealty he's done and backbending he's done since then to be on Donald Trump's side, doesn't always work out. McLaughlin, Vaughn Hillier, thank you both for getting up early, especially Vaughn, who was up very late. Coming up, President Trump threatens a, quote, massive attack on Iran, all while offering no resolution to the nearly 5-month war in what's called a little excursion. We'll discuss it all with former CIA Director John Brennan. Watch the video.
Advisors and senior members of his cabinet to decide whether or not to intensify the assault. That's according to 4 people briefed on the discussion. The president told Axios this week that he's close to making a decision on launching a, quote, massive attack. The president has been ready for his war of choice to end since being
I think there's a court that stopped him. There's a court or a judge that stopped him, said he had to put all that stuff back about American history.
Into the war, and the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is losing patience again. Quote, during a recent meeting in the Oval Office, he launched into a tirade against Iranian leaders, calling them scumbags and lunatics, and unleashing a series of expletives. That's according to a person who heard the comments firsthand. But despite his threats of escalation, it seems the president is clear the president doesn't actually have a real plan for Iran.
What we're doing now is we're ending any chance where they can have a nuclear missile.
Mr. President, there are no signs that Iran is ready to stop fighting. So what is the plan? Is the plan to just keep bombing until they give up?
There are no signs. What, you know something that I don't know? And they want to make a deal. But I say they're not ready to make a deal. We want to get it over with, and we want to do it right. But we have to do what we came to do. I think they're getting more and more serious as the days go by, for maybe the obvious reason. But we are talking to them right now.
We're joined now by John Brennan, former CIA director and MS Now senior national security and intelligence analyst. Director Brennan, good to see you. Thank you for being here. I think my question for you is twofold. Number one, it feels like the president has backed himself in a bit of a corner. Right, that he expected this war to end quickly, almost like the military operation that we saw in Venezuela. It has not. It is dragged on, and there are these midterm elections that are looming. And he has hemmed himself in a bit because he has restricted our military action here to air assaults. And so my question for you is twofold. Number one, do you feel like this escalation that he keeps teasing is about to happen? And talk to us about boots on the ground and whether or not that is still a viable option for this president to bring the war to an end more quickly.
Well, clearly I think he's flailing right now because he doesn't really have a good plan or way ahead. We've launched massive attacks repeatedly against Iran, and they've not capitulated. They're not going to give up. It pains me to say, this is an unwinnable war for the United States. Mm-hmm. There's just no way that this regime in Iran, which is now controlled by the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is going to relent and give up because they're determined to oppose a foreign force and intervention. So, I think he's threatening, just like he does in the domestic political scene. He tries to threaten and intimidate. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work with the Iranians, and it's not going to work.
You just said this is an unwinnable war. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah, that's what I certainly believe. From a standpoint of getting the Iranians to surrender or to give up, there's no way that's going to happen. And, there needs to be some type of negotiated way forward to open up the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before this conflict, to be able to get the Iranians on some type of path so that there's not going to be a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. And Trump keeps talking about the nuclear weapon. That's sort of a red herring. The Iranians never made a decision to actually fabricate a nuclear weapon. Yes, they were doing things that gave them the capability in the future, but there was no decision to do that. So on your question about boots on the ground, when I think about other conflicts, we had over 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. We had over 170,000 troops in Iraq. We had over 500,000 U.S. troops in Vietnam. None of those conflicts really turned out all that well. Mm. If we were to put troops on the ground in Iran, it would be a bloodbath. It really would. It's a country of 94 million people. What are we expecting to accomplish there? He's talking about taking over Kharg Island. That's within range, a missile range of the Iranian mainland. So he doesn't have good option. He keeps hoping that by trying to intimidate the Iranians, they're going to give up. They're not going to. There needs to be some way out of this that's going to be through negotiations. But look at the correspondence thing last night. It's a very nasty, unserious, mentally unstable individual And this is the person that the Iranians are going to negotiate with? No wonder why they're looking at us and saying, keep coming at us. We're not going to give up. And, unfortunately, now more Iranian people are supportive of the regime than were before the conflict even started.
I mean, the Trump part of the side of this will always say that it's the madman theory that if you look crazy, then people will feel like you may act accordingly, and so they won't do what they will behave accordingly. That is not what we're seeing with Iran, right? We're seeing with Iran that they are very proud people. That at the end of the day, if you take out like the top of the regime and you kill them, and the son comes in and you killed his family, that is a problem. I want to also look at the Iran war timeline here. February 28th, we strike Israel and the United States, which they've been very quiet recently, strikes on Iran. A ceasefire deal was reached April 7th.
Grab some coffee, be right back.
Tells Congress the hostilities have terminated. June 14th, tentative peace plan announced. July 8th, Trump says ceasefire is, quote, over. July 10th, Trump notifies Congress conflict resumed on July 7th. July 17th and 19th, 4 U.S. troops killed in Jordan and Iraq. That timeline, that quickly, what it says to me is there was never a plan going in. The President of the United States, like Anthony said, thought this was going to be like Venezuela. Now, why he thought that, no other president thought that. One thing that he has said over and over again, Director Brennan, is that he wants to do things that other people haven't been able to do. And that's one of these things, that he was going to stop Iran because other presidents couldn't do it. There are very good reasons why they didn't do it, because of exactly what we're seeing now.
It shows that there's no strategic approach. He's making these tactical moves. Bomb, threaten, intimidate, but there's no strategic plan in terms of how we're going to get out of this quagmire. And so, again, I think the Iranian people are looking at the United States and saying, wait a minute, you just killed our leadership, our spiritual leader. You continue to bomb us. And if they look out over the past 75 years, I mean, we always look at Iran as, this is the chief state sponsor of terrorism or whatever, and all the things that they've done. And yes, it's a ruthless regime. But if you look at all the things the United States has done toward them, and they look at us, we deposed one of their prime ministers. We have killed leadership. We have done so much. So this is not going to, I think, end well for us.
Every hero is an enemy, is a villain to somebody.
Director Brennan, before we're out of time, I want to get to the news from the New York Times yesterday that the number of U.S. death troops suddenly appeared lower on the Pentagon website. I'll read it quickly. 3 military officials said that one reason behind the change was that the Trump administration decided to remove 4 service members killed this past weekend from the list because their deaths occurred after President Trump declared a ceasefire in the war in April. The president on Wednesday just witnessed the return of the bodies of these 4 young Army soldiers. Why did they die? If we are not at war, I mean, what was your response to that news?
Well, I'm no longer shocked at what's happened here, but it's so disturbing that this administration basically is dishonest when it comes to such a solemn event such as the death of additional U.S. soldiers. And so it's very unfortunate that, again, we have an administration that is continuing to pursue this. These are individuals who served, their country. And it's because of the decision of the commander-in-chief, Donald Trump, that we are in this conflict and war. And so why the Pentagon, why the Department of Defense is not going to clearly acknowledge that they died in their service to this country? Was it needs? Was it success? Yes, you can argue that, certainly. But at least we should recognize their sacrifice and their selfless duty to this country.
Dr. Brennan, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, if it's
Still,
myself.
all eyes are on Trump's former personal lawyer, Todd Blanche, after GOP Rep. Jim Jordan referred former special counsel Jack Smith to criminal prosecution in what Smith's lawyers are calling a meritless attack. Will Blanche follow this seemingly political demand? Well, we're going to talk with Congresswoman Becca Balint about it, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, next. You're watching The Weekend.
Sometimes intelligence is good, and sometimes you look at Comey, and you look at Brennan, and you look at Clapper, and I'm supposed to believe that intelligence? I never believe that intelligence. You look at Brennan, and you look at Clapper, and you get some real beauties.
Well, I think Brennan's a sick person.
How involved was John Brennan
totally involved. He was totally involved. John Brennan was one of the architects, in my opinion.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in the East. Suffice to say, he has been obsessed for years now. Trump has been attacking and criticizing former director of the CIA, John Brennan, for years. Going after him seems to be one of Trump's greatest obsessions, but these are not just hollow smears and complaints. Trump has weaponized the government he now leads to go after his perceived opponent. Today marks a significant development in that story. Director Brennan is today going on the offense. But first, a quick refresher. Director Brennan, following decades of public service in the CIA, served as the agency's director from 2013 to 2017. During those years under President Barack Obama. The director became a target of Donald Trump's, ostensibly for his role in the intelligence assessment that stated that Russia interfered in the 2016 election with the aim of helping Donald Trump win. Since then, Donald Trump has railed against John Brennan as well as others involved in that assessment. He has revoked John Brennan's security clearance, and 2 investigations have been launched into the former director of the CIA. One is over allegations that Director Brennan lied to Congress in 2023 about the intelligence assessment. It was a referral from the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Trump ally Jim Jordan. The other is a case that Brennan is part of some sort of grand conspiracy that Caroline Leavitt has talked about from the podium of the White House briefing room to keep Trump out of office. Brennan has denied any wrongdoing in both cases. Today, Director Brennan, who is an MS Now senior national security and intelligence analyst, is joining us for an exclusive interview to discuss his latest move, which is to sue Donald Trump and the Justice Department. Director Brennan has asked a judge to force DOJ to preserve all of its records from that lawsuit. Quote, administration officials from the acting attorney general to the FBI director and the counselor overseeing the Brennan investigations have been publicly declaring Director Brennan a criminal, not only before securing a conviction in court, but even before a full investigation and indictment. And certain officials in the Department of Justice are engaging in demonstrably irregular prosecutorial activity in order to gin up a case that will satisfy the president's direction. Director Brennan expects that he will forcefully challenge any eventual indictment as a product of an unconstitutionally vindictive and selective prosecution. Given the government's questionable recent history with respect to its record preservation and other legal obligations, however, Director Brennan has a well-founded concern that those records and communications will not be preserved until such time as the court can review them for evidence of unconstitutional vindictiveness. About Brennan's lawsuit, the New York Times writes this, quote, the request for a judicial order requiring officials to keep records about a case that has not even been filed was somewhat unusual, and yet it reflected just how abnormal Trump's revenge campaign has become in recent months. As the president's attempts to use the courts to go after his adversaries have become more aggressive, so too have the reciprocal efforts by defense lawyers who have sought to fight the inquiries at ever earlier stages of the investigative process. Firing back at Donald Trump's revenge campaign is where we begin this hour with former director of the CIA, John Brennan. Thank you for being here and having this conversation with us.
Absolutely, Nicole. Thanks for having me on.
So, what made you sort of take a different legal strategy? Because the facts have always been the same, and I just want to ask you to go over the facts of the smears and the alleged investigations into you as they've been unearthed by Trump ally John Durham, by Marco Rubio, who was a senator in charge of the Intelligence Committee when it comes to that 2016 intelligence assessment.
Well, Nicole, clearly I didn't come to the decision to launch this lawsuit against the Trump administration, President Trump, and the Department of Justice lightly. But as you and I have talked numerous times over the past 18 months, Donald Trump has been engaged in this campaign to punish individuals he considers his enemies. And I am being targeted by Donald Trump because I fulfilled my obligations in 2016 as director of the CIA to expose Russian interference in that presidential election of that year. And there was an intelligence community assessment that was put out by the FBI, CIA, NSA, and the Office of Director of National Intelligence that chronicled exactly what President Putin and the Russians were doing. Well, obviously, Donald Trump didn't like that. But also, he has condemned me because I have spoken out publicly since I left office when I see that things that Donald Trump is doing are wrong-headed or that are just reflecting, I think, the incompetence as well as the corruption of his administration. So clearly, over these last 18 months, it's not just me, it's other individuals as well. Jerome Powell, Jim Comey, it's others, Letitia James, who have also been targeted. And most egregiously, he's not just condemning us publicly with his rhetoric. He is leveraging the tremendous authorities of the Department of Justice in very corrupt, unethical, and I would argue illegal ways to use those authorities to launch these investigations against individuals. Now, there are 2 grand jury investigations underway in the Southern District of Florida where I have been subpoenaed. I have complied completely with the requests from the government. Despite the speciousness of these investigations and the lack of any evidence indicating any wrongdoing on my part. But I have come to believe and talk with my lawyers that we can't trust the Department of Justice to carry out its duties in the manner that it has done over the past centuries in terms of a presumption of regularity, that the courts will give the Department of Justice and the U.S. government the presumption that it is carrying out its obligations responsibly and with integrity. But if it has not, in terms of forum shopping and judge shopping and having individuals and professional prosecutors who have resigned rather than pursue investigations that have no basis, in fact. So if they're doing this, I also am concerned, and my lawyers are very concerned, that any type of records that might in fact expose what they are doing are not being kept. They have, openly, decried or have condemned the obligations to fulfill their obligations under the Presidential Records Act. They are using different apps to conceal their messaging, like Signal apps, things are automatically deleted. And this is in contravention of long-held requirements that the government is supposed to keep these records. So again, it looks as though with the appointment of Joe DeGenova and continued investigations and the effort underway in Florida, that there could be an indictment of me, despite whatever speciousness occurred. And so we don't want to wait until that point. And so this is a lawsuit that basically is asking the court to compel the government to preserve all those records that they have within the Department of Justice, White House, other agencies that relate at all to the investigations into me, so that if in fact there is some effort here to circumvent the law and to abuse the authorities of the Justice Department, it will be available to the court if in fact there is going to be this indictment.
Don't you already have a smoking gun in the things Donald Trump has said about you? I mean, tell me what the records would prove, and is it that your lawyers will argue that should you be indicted, it's all a vindictive prosecution?
Yes, well, as well know, in the Southern District of Florida, a very competent, respected professional prosecutor either stepped aside or was pushed aside because she was not willing to go forward with an indictment or any type of effort to try to obtain an indictment from a grand jury. And they said, reportedly, she said there's no evidence there to support such indictment. And we also see that this has been shopped around, and the complaint makes clear, in different districts, whether it be in Virginia or in Pennsylvania. And it's clearly that there is not an appetite on the part of those Department of Justice employees who continue to adhere to their obligations. But it's not stopped Donald Trump and the Department of Justice. And so, again, the fact that this investigation is still ongoing, and there was just a recent, press reporting about what DeGenova's team is doing in terms of, additional interviews, and people are being interviewed. And I'm not just doing this on behalf of myself. Yes, I'm the sole target of these 2 investigations down in Florida, but I'm doing it on behalf of others who are being harassed and who are being subjected to the same type of punishment and condemnation. And we have to stand up against Donald Trump and the abuses of authority and the fact that the Department of Justice is being exploited in this way. So what I'm trying to do is, align myself with those universities, those law firms, those individuals who really are pushing back And I realize that this is going to, irritate the Department of Justice or the Trump administration, but it's the right thing to do. And I think in light of what's going on in this country and all the abuse of power and all the corruption that's going on, people have to stand up because it's John Brennan today, but it's going to be, I think, many others tomorrow.
A judge in the case of, I think, Kilmer Garcia found that it was essentially a crime declared and then reverse engineered by Todd Lynch specifically. What are you seeking from Todd Lynch and the Department of Justice?
Well, again, there's a complaint and then there's a preliminary motion for there to be an immediate sort of injunction that will, again, compel the government, Department of Justice and other agencies that are noted in the complaint, to immediately preserve all records, all documents, emails, text messages, whatever else, correspondence that might have gone back and forth between the Department of Justice Maine and down in the Southern District of Florida, to preserve all of those records because we're going to need them in the event that there is going to be some type of indictment or charges against me. I really want the courts to know that this is an effort that's been put up as part of this punishment campaign that Donald Trump has engineered. And the fact that you have individuals, unfortunately, his loyalists, who are willing to go along with him. I am just so glad that there are still individuals of integrity within the Department of Justice, within the U.S. Attorney's offices who are saying no. Saying, no, we're not going to do this because it's inconsistent, again, not only with their authorities, but also with American values.
Donald Trump has gotten all kinds of special benefits and exemptions from the Supreme Court, but even he found that trying to rewrite the Constitution by himself is too much, and he's done that big loss this week for upholding citizenship the way it's always been. Meaning he doesn't get to rewrite it or water down or change birthright citizenship. And that has some conservatives who, if they follow the law at all, would have seen this coming, but they're still upset.
The Supreme Court of the United States upheld birthright citizenship, and that is a legal abomination.
Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney
And get the hell out of this country. Because unless you're a Native American, you don't belong in this country.
We're used to getting betrayed by Roberts, but I mean,
Boom!
No
one's an illegal immigrant on stolen land. Get the fuck out of here.
About who you let into your country, even on a temporary basis, the legalization of an invasion of America.
This is a nation of immigrants.
At best, misinformed noise. At worst,
unless you're a Native American, you came from some fucking where else.
says what it says.
So pack up your bags and get out.
Themselves out as the ideological view that you hew to that. They call it originalism, protectionism. And we are a country that defines citizenship by being here. So if you're born here, you're an American citizen. You don't have to then do a loyalty test or prove your religion, race, or other things that in the old days and in some other countries they do. And people know that. Everybody knows that. But Trump has demanded this kind of performance, and maybe some people, as I said, ultimately started to believe it. I can't tell you what's in their minds. I can just tell you
well, not right
that
now.
they are wrong by the law, which is why a coalition on the Supreme Court that includes Republican justices landed by saying the court said the Constitution says what it says. Presidents don't get to just change it. That's why we have a Constitution.
What?
All of this fairly straightforward. Meanwhile, one Republican went all the way into the famed references of the Statute of Liberty.
Even before. Can I go?
Not right now, Malachi. I'm kind of busy.
A big bed sheet over the Statue of Liberty. 10 years. 10-year moratorium on immigration. She's going to go to sleep for a while. She got to go to sleep for a while because we're not letting anybody in anymore. Some people think I'm not saying it's dead. What I'm trying to say is...
Fuck you. You get out. You piece of shit.
Yes, it's all metaphors, but putting the Statue of Liberty to sleep isn't something you usually hear from politicians in any party because, you know, it's a symbol of America and what we stand for in our best days. I will mention that the lawmaker is well within his policy arguments to say that there should be lower immigration or zero immigration. Now, a lot of American businesses oppose that because they want all kinds of skilled workers, technical workers, AI, smart people from around the world, and a lot of other folks have arguments for immigration you're probably familiar with. But yes, consistent with this ruling, the government could lower the amount of immigration they allow in any given year, or the amount of visas or citizenship applications they accept. All this ruling is about is honoring the fact that our Constitution already says if you're born here, you're an American. You don't get born here. The court ruling was on one matter relatively close. It was within a single vote of actually going the other direction. And that, again, remember, it says all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the U.S. For the fact that there were 4 votes to go in a different direction despite the plain English there shows you, as I mentioned in our initial coverage, that apparently there are now 4 Trump-friendly votes who will say up is down or rewrite the Constitution at his request. And if they'll do that in immigration, they might do that when it comes to your voting rights or whether we have free and fair elections. As for it being a close call, here was Vice President.
I do actually think there's a really big silver lining here. The fact that this case was a 5-4 decision effectively means that the concept of birthright citizenship, which is an absurdity to the 14th Amendment, that concept is hanging by a thread. We actually have an opportunity to reverse this decision, just as we've reversed so many bad decisions throughout the generations.
That is the sitting vice president's take. They lost. They lost with Republican justices ruling against them. They lost with a Trump appointee ruling against them. But he says, hey, we can still find some way to reverse it. That's what you're up against if you are a believer in the Constitution and the Supreme Court's rule of law. Trump has long obsessed over crowd sizes. He's throwing this Independence Day fair, and they're having a little trouble with it on the National Mall. If you're going to show who's there, and you can see some of these photos, then you're going to see with your own eyes what's going on. And that kind of attendance poses some trouble even for the often Trump-friendly Fox News.
Happy early birthday, America. We're celebrating already at the Great American State Fair. Man, we got thousands of people celebrating this birthday with us.
And it's because there are tons of people here. It's a huge space, and it's just going to get more and more crowded as the week goes on.
Sometimes the pictures really don't tell the full story, because if you look behind us, you see.
And sometimes they do tell the whole story. In the case of that weak-ass state fair, it was a total bomb.
You know, we came all the way down here so we could have this shot behind us, and now we're going to tell you why what you see behind us, the empty field, isn't really what to focus on. Somewhere there's more people. That was a kind of distortion in real time, a matter that is small but goes to credibility. Insiders say Trump is livid at the obviously low turnout, which can't be masked. As for the media trying to basically avoid offending an audience of one, well, South Park mocked and maybe predicted this.
This is 60 Minutes. Oh boy. Oh God. The small town of South Park, Colorado is protesting against the president. The townspeople claim that the president, who is a great man.
A great man.
Great guy. We know he's probably watching, and we are just reporting on this town in Colorado that's being sued by the president, and they are fighting back.
And just to be clear, we don't agree with them.
No.
No, don't be mad at us, or we swear there's people back there somewhere. The jokes write themselves, but the punchline is evidently pretty serious, because we have to have facts. If we're going to govern this country together, and we might need leaders who are concerned about more than just their personal popularity and crowd size.
Joining me now is Congressman Robert Garcia. He is the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. And his fellow Oversight Democrats today debuted a widget on their website, you can check it out, that they say tracks the Trump family's profits from, quote, digital grifts. And man, the numbers keep going up literally every second. There's so many things to ask you. I want to start by just playing you something that journalist Maggie Haberman said recently. She has a book out that everybody seems to be reading. And she had this to say before Trump's financial disclosure was released. Let me play that.
We've only, the collective we, the Wall Street Journal has done a lot of work, the Times, the Washington Post, a lot of outlets have done a lot of work on this. All of us have only scratched the surface, I think, of what what is happening because there's so much we can't see.
It's interesting because Chris and I were talking about how it's sort of a surprise they released this, but it is a little bit like we know what they tell us. You've been thinking a lot about Trump's unprecedented financial conflicts. Do you agree with Maggie Haberman about the scope of what needs to be uncovered and really that we still may not know a lot?
I completely agree. I mean, the reality is what we know with the public facing is just part of the massive corruption that is happening every single day in the Trump White House and across all of our agencies. There is evidence of pay to play. There is evidence of the family enriching themselves. Clearly, there's no question that everything from pardons being sold to contracts being given to family members to the grift around the cryptocurrency scheme. I mean, just Donald Trump in just this presidency alone is $2 billion richer. Just him, not to mention the rest of his family. And so there's an enormous amount there. And whether it's corruption, whether it's a protection of pedophiles in the Epstein scandal, whether it's giving out contracts to friends, whether it's selling access directly to the White House, there will be so much to investigate in the years ahead that Donald Trump and his family have to be prepared to answer questions and to be accountable to the American public.
And I want to talk about that because I think so many people are thinking about that. You're going to be in quite a hot, important seat about that. But first, I wanted to just get your thoughts about that series of events and the financial disclosures I mentioned at the top of the show. That basically Trump paused his Liberation Day tariff, leading to a stock market surge one day after 327 purchases were made in his name. Well, everybody's still digging through all of this, as I'm sure members of the committee staff are, but how does that timing strike you?
Well, the timing is incredibly suspect. I mean, look, I think that is pretty clear to most folks that are looking at this, is that the Trumps are enriching themselves and using the government to do so. While people can't afford gas, groceries, the cost of goods, the rent, the Trumps are taking people's hard-earned wealth, giving it to themselves, giving tax cuts to themselves and their friends, and then manipulating whether it's the market or they're manipulating their relationships or they're using our foreign policy to sell off access and make themselves richer. People need to understand that this is the most corrupt person to ever hold office in this country, and we are going to expose it. I will also share that we have reports from folks at our agencies, whistleblowers, people who are engaged in day-to-day activities that see the corruption. We are building strong investigations, and we're going to make the case, and we're going to take this case to the American public, certainly when we have the power to subpoena and have actual hearings, that the Trump family is a family that is focused on enriching themselves and nothing more.
So let's talk about how you're going to go about doing that. I know you're thinking about it, and Democrats have a very good shot of taking back power in the House, especially. The Trump sons, as I just noted this, they claim there is a firewall between them and their father. It's very hard to believe. I don't think that one particularly passes the smell test. How would you go about
226,368.
Does it involve bringing them up? What is the process that people should expect?
238,944. Not even in the millions
One,
yet.
there is no firewall. Give me a break. That's hilarious. The Trump boys they follow their dad, whether it's on the
296,680.
Air Force One around the world when dad is out meeting with foreign dignitaries. The boys are right behind cutting real estate deals. Donald Trump Jr. is apparently now, of course, advisor on all of these new companies popping up that are getting these huge contracts that are enriching the company and Donald Trump
way
Jr.
over 100.
with defense contracts. And so what is happening right now is
No, it's not 1 million. You're about a third of the way to 1 million.
and other committees to investigate, to have the accountability. I've shared with a lot of folks that when we win the majority, we will have a forward-looking agenda, and that's important. But so is accountability. We cannot just move on from the corruption and from the stealing of the American taxpayers' hard-earned wealth. Folks like Donald Trump Jr., Eric
400,000.
Jared
It's almost
Kushner,
half a
Stephen
million.
Miller, they're going to have to be
Almost.
in front of our committee. We're going to subpoena documents. We're going to ensure that they appear. There's already been precedent.
That's almost half a million. You're 14 away from that. There you go. Now you're over half a million.
I'm still trying to remember what actually he did. Where was the grift in
Yep, you're over half a million.
These guys are actually stealing
now
billions of dollars from all of you and from the American taxpayer.
Did I pass?
And so the power of
Pass what?
investigation,
$1 million?
putting the right teams in
Yes.
No,
place,
not $1 million.
coordinating with committees.
You're about halfway
My
there.
partner, Jamie Raskin, on the Judiciary Committee.
I don't know
All
how
of that
we
is going to
do
be
this.
important. And we're working every single day and uncovering more and more ground. That will continue all the way through November.
What's after
And on day
infinite?
one, you can expect
Nothing's
numerous
after
subpoenas to
infinite.
go out the door.
Let me do
I think
infinite
for
times.
anybody watching who's just as pissed off as you sound and I am, and there's so many people are in this country
I think
about
this
how
is
much
it.
money
Is
this
this?
family is making off
No.
of the presidency, they're hearing you and they're
Put a
thinking
decimal
like,
point
that
in there.
sounds great.
What?
And it does sound great. I think, as you know,
Oh,
people
that
should know,
changes
you'd
the
be
number when
taking
you
the
put a decimal
gavel
point in
if
there.
Democrats went back to
Okay.
House under unprecedented
Look how
circumstances. I mean, there's Trump's weaponized Justice Department this term. They're going to continue. You won't have a
Not
partner in the
working.
DOJ. How are you
Not
going to
working.
approach this
What'd you do?
if
Push
they
clear.
just say, I'm not going to appear.
Clear.
I'm not going to abide by the subpoena. I refuse.
clear.
What are
Clear.
you going to do without the cooperation from the Justice Department?
Look, I think first, we got to start out with courage. And I think one thing that's really important is that we have got to take this on with everything we got and know that the president and his allies are going to weaponize the government against us in this process. He's already shown he's ready to do that. We expect he will continue to do that going into the fall. And he's going to go after folks on our committee and those people that are taking him on. So one, we've got to take this on with courage. We've got to be fearless. We've got to not only build national support like we've done with the Epstein investigation. It's the singular, most bipartisan, popular issue in the country where people see eye to eye. And that's because we've built support at the grassroots across the country, going into places where people are having these conversations, and on TV shows and in the media that are not maybe traditional news shows. We've got to reach folks where they are at. And then finally, we've got to use our judicial powers along with our congressional powers to go after the family, to go after the corruption, and ensure that we're getting all of the information that's happening across our agencies. In the majority, as you know, we also have the power to sue. In the minority, you don't have the same ability to bring lawsuits forward to the courts, whether it's federal court or other court. That's a power that most of the majority has. And so our ability to go to the courts, to use our allies in all the different judicial groups, also will go to the courts. And the congressional power to subpoena and document is going to be really important. There is precedent for family members to appear, and we're going to hammer that home. We will have, and we're going to require that the Trumps, the Kushners, and others
You're
appear
past
for our
trillion.
committee and others.
I don't know what
Let
comes
me ask
after
you about
trillion.
this jet, because I
what
think
passed
the visual of Trump flying, I mean, he flew for it on the first time today. This jet that was, of course, donated by Qatar, refurbished to the tune of hundreds of millions of taxpayer
I don't know.
dollars.
That's a big number.
Aside from the obvious issues,
That's
like
I
the
think
survey, the fact
my
that Trump says
brother
it will
does
go to his
that.
presidential library and
I can't count that high.
is really
You
hard
can.
to swallow.
I don't know what comes after trillion.
You know what plastic
As a product of the U.S. government.
Want me to Google that?
Look, I think there's
Sure.
there's some conversations.
Google what number comes after
We'll
trillion.
see some actions in court on this issue. But look, I think broadly speaking, as an American, I think all of us should be horrified at what's happening. That any American president, even a corrupt one like Donald Trump, is going to be flying around on a jet given to us by a foreign nation. And he's going to be flying this jet on the 4th of July over the mall, celebrating a foreign nation's jet that then he plans on keeping. That is not patriotism. That is not feeling proud of our country. And every American should be sickened by this action by Donald Trump. And so that action, if and being investigated, there are numerous committees looking at action this plane because it's very suspect that we're not also feeling that this plane might even be secure from a national security perspective. And certainly whether or not we should be allowed to keep it is a question I think will be fought in the courts.
Google on this one.
Congressman
I
Robert
got
Garcia,
Google on this
there's
one
always
too.
so much to talk with you about. Thank
I
you again for being here
this
tonight.
thing. Look.
And it's this little thing in
It's
the
a little
Constitution
phone.
called the Alliance Clause. And I want to
What?
read
Alex
so
is
people
fluent.
understand from a civic perspective what our Constitution does not permit. Okay?
There's a clause in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7
They said
that deals specifically
$1
with
trillion after
domestic
trillion.
emoluments. And it's
What's
called the
after
Presidential Emoluments Clause because it
2016?
ensures that the president receives a fixed salary and bars any additional emoluments
Hard
from the
now,
federal
okay.
government or the states during the term
What's
of office. This protects the president from undue pressure or influence from
What's
Congress
after
or
1
individual
million?
states. You see the words, the president shall, as stated, receive that money, right? The foreign
million.
emoluments clause,
That's
which is in Article
after
1, Section 9,
What's
Clause 8
after
states
100?
that the president is prohibits any federal office holder from accepting any present, emolument, office, or title from a foreign state or its rulers without the consent of Congress.
What's after
Its
1
purpose
million
is
and
there to prevent corruption and limit foreign influence of U.S. officials, reflecting the framework's concern about gift-giving practices common in Europe at the time. Well, seeing that is common today.
What's your first name?
Look, I don't want people to gloss over what Michael is saying and the folks at home listening, because the reality is, as we barrel toward our semi-quincentennial celebration, I will be saying it until July 4th. The framers, they had literally just fought a revolution against the monarchy, where the people within the monarchy regularly profited from the government. They did not want that, so it was intentional. And so the comments that you're hearing from not just Democrats, but Republicans like Michael Steele, folks all across the country about what the president is doing, not just that it's corrupt, but it is literally against the Constitution and the law. That's not a Democratic talking point. That is a very old, I thought, a fundamental value loop that we all held as Americans. My last point on this one is that Donald Trump is doing all of this. Meanwhile, Americans are being squeezed. And so they're seeing these headlines about billions of dollars in crypto, $400 million jet from the Qataris, which is that even a national, is that even safe? That's another question I had. All of this money that Donald Trump and his family are making. Meanwhile, they can't afford to go to the grocery store. I was at the grocery store today, and I was like, well, what the hell is going on here? It's expensive.
It's very expensive, and I think it speaks to the disconnect this administration has with everyday working Americans, but also just how unseemly this is. This is unprecedented in American history, this level of corruption and this level of grip. I saw a story recently where Gerald Ford's son talked about how they went into the White House, and he was a young guy, and he came into the White House, and he ordered all this food, and he gave it to all his friends, and they had a great old time. And then this morning, his dad calls him up and goes, you know we pay for them, right? You know that's not free. We saw Michelle Obama in Chicago tell a story about how she would go through the itemized grocery list about what her kids were eating and just make sure that they had not spent too much money because they had to be in charge of that budget, but also wanted to be mindful of what everyday Americans were going through. This is an administration that is more than happy to enrich themselves, sees this second term as YOLO. You only live once, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I control the Justice Department. I control the markets that regulate this crypto. I'm going to enrich myself. And you know what? Rules and regulations are for suckers. And that's what we're seeing right now, and it's a very scary thing. Okay, we got great
The first number is 0, actually. The first number is 0. The first number is 0. Did you know that?
They spent a lot of cash in the last presidential election. They also spent a lot to like house
What's
members.
the next number
Crypto's name was all
after
over the White
that?
House for the UFC fight. Tell us more about this.
This is a kind of crypto that I think folks need to understand. Most people watching tonight are not trading crypto, are not investing in crypto. Why is Donald Trump? Why are his kids? Somebody who he called it a scam himself a couple years ago before you realized he could make a profit off of this. They're doing crypto because unlike the first administration when there were conversations about the foreign emoluments clause and whether foreign countries were buying hotel rooms at the Trump Hotel here in D.C. and renting out the ballroom.
That's like rated G compared to now.
Are you a number?
We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially. Now we're talking about $1.4 billion in one single year. And why is crypto such a big deal? Number one, there's not actually anything tangible to it. Okay, this is about potential foreign countries and foreign entities being able to put hundreds of millions of dollars to Donald Trump and his family in crypto is secret. We don't know what is happening in the crypto market literally the Department of Justice, the unit called the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team in the Department of Justice. Donald Trump disbanded it last year. And so the fact that this is so secret and we don't even know where this $1.4 billion is coming from, I think is a paramount concern, because with those hotel rooms being bought, the Trump Hotel, we didn't know where countries were. This, we have no idea.
Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, authors of the new book Regime Change, are back with us. Jonathan, I'm reading from an excerpt
Tell
here.
Google I want to marry her.
New carpet was laid in the bathroom on Inauguration Day as before. Trump's preference for a fully carpeted bathroom had posed a challenge to resident staff during his first term. The portion nearest the shower would often be the staff has never quite but they worried about mold growing. Encountered carpeting the bathroom, but this is a real Donald Trump must-have.
Yes, it was important to him to have a fully carpeted bathroom, and the resident staff's solution to the damp problem, the potential mold problem, was to get essentially a small piece of carpet and overlay it as if it was a bath mat of the other carpet in front of the shower, and then substitute and rotate that carpeting. So we do have some details from inside the residence, including some disputes and tensions between the president and the first lady over the interior decorating and renovating, but that was a detail that for one reason or other seems to have stuck with people.
Yes, well, I think it's really quite memorable, just because you don't encounter that a lot. Let's talk a little about Bill Pulte, who is, as of now, the acting national director of the intelligence in the United States of America. He oversees all intelligence operations. He is one of these people that seems to have managed to kind of ingratiate himself into Trump by essentially always being there to cultivate Trump's most sort of vindictive, worst impulses. Is that a fair characterization, Jonathan, to how Pulte has sort of gotten to where he is?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, we have scenes in the book where Bill Pulte was squired around Mar-a-Lago during the transition by Roger Stone. I'm sure your viewers are familiar with Roger Stone. He was the heir of a home building fortune, and he got this job at this very little-known agency, the Federal Housing Finance Agency. But what he would do is he would get these massive foam boards printed out, blown up, and he would lug them around and take them into the Oval Office or take them to Trump's golf courses, and they would have images of Trump's enemies on them. And Pulte basically discovered within that agency a way to give Trump an opportunity to go after his enemies. So, for example, we have a scene in the book of Pulte showing Trump a foam board that had this giant blow-up of Lisa Cook's head, the Federal Reserve Bank governor that Trump tried to fire. And over the top it just said fraudster, right? That's the sort of level of material that he's putting in front of Trump. But Trump, of course, loves it in many cases. So now that he's in their DNI, I mean, I think Trump said today he can declassify anything he wants while he's there in this temporary job. There's been murmurings that he's going to try to do something related to the 2020 election. Hard to imagine what that might be. That's absolutely his role in Trump's mind as hatchet man.
Maggie, you guys write about the constrained information environment and how the president's not getting there's not a lot of broad inputs coming into him. I guess my question to you is, do you think one of two things? Does he not care anymore about essentially what we might call quaintly public opinion? Or does he not actually have connections to public opinion?
It's a bit of both, Chris. One of the things that was shocking to us as we were reporting on this book is two things. One is how he may get that way. It's not that he doesn't care at all about the midterms, but he certainly doesn't care much. He may decide he's going to care eventually, but this is just not something that he's been focused on at all in any major way. He will do his endorsements, but it's mostly to keep track of his own mentality. We keep hearing about how he's about to go do a bunch of events. we're still waiting for that to happen with any kind of regular cadence. Maybe it will in the fall. It hasn't yet. And he gave a very revealing quote last year about how he was proud that Republicans didn't do well on the ticket when he wasn't doing it as well. So that tells you something about the mindset. Number two, we got hold of private polling from his own internal pollster and that had circulated memos to, a group of about a dozen people in his world. There was one poll that showed in December that it was shortly after Trump gave what was billed as it was going to be a speech about affordability, and instead Trump spent much of the time mocking the word affordability, describing it as a Democratic hoax. It was very clear that Trump was in trouble with voters as of December on the core issue that he had won on twice, which was affordability, and that he was going to make voters' lives better. And there was a line in the memo about how, and I'm paraphrasing, but that unless the White House and the President and the GOP were honest, or the public board was honest about the affordability crisis and how to fix it, it was going to be a very tough fall this coming year. So that was really striking. But it's not that his advisors don't know it or don't tell him. He's so unreceptive to bad news. So there's always all this strategizing about how to get through to him. And his outside inputs are very limited now. Most of his news comes from information comes from Natalie Carter, this aide who's referred to as the human printer, who sits on the side of the Oval Office in almost every meeting. He is a supplier of all kinds of good news stories to him. Most of his information on television comes from Fox News, which is far less critical of him in this term overall than it was in term. Most of his information comes from calls where he reaches out to some ally, or, and Jonathan and I write about this, the Mar-a-Lago patio, where he goes and people tell him how fabulous he is, or they stand and applaud him when he walks in. So he's not out there talking to voters. He's not doing rallies. He is doing these gaggles that you see on the screen right there. He is doing relatively few sit-down interviews, long form, and he is creating his own reality.
You hear him in Jonathan Swan, what's called the Computer Change. Really is it's really, really interesting. I feel like I got some more insight into this even after this 11 years of my one purpose life covering this man. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
So back on Friday, a federal judge gave Donald Trump 2 weeks to basically erase his name from the Kennedy Center, where it never belonged in the first place. The judge blocked Trump's plans to shutter the Kennedy Center for what Trump had called a 2-year, quote, complete rebuilding. Trump was so mad, he posted twice about it on Saturday. He, of course, attacked the judge, called him a, quote, anti-Trump hater, and attempted to make the case for his own renovations and control
Is that supposed
of the
to be an
Kennedy
insult?
Center, control that Donald Trump declared one day earlier he would relinquish because the Kennedy Center, Trump said, is a, quote, failing institution. In reality, it was, of course, Trump's control and politicization of the institution that brought on mass layoffs and destruction and dozens of cancellations of performances, which are the lifeblood of the Kennedy Center. But now, according to the Associated Press, this ruling is bringing, quote, hope to artists who have been alienated by Trump's takeover. Joining our coverage, senior executive editor for Bloomberg Opinion, our political analyst Tim O'Brien, Claire here. So you've joined at the perfect moment, right? We've established that the corruption is catching up with Donald Trump. And I think there's so much evidence in public view from the weekend that Trump is absolutely out of his mind in all of these legal and political setbacks.
Because they're cutting to the core of who he is. Donald Trump's corruption and how great a Donald Trump is isn't just one facet of other things he's doing. It's central to who he is. He has always been this person. And he hasn't been held fully accountable for any of it. He still isn't. But at least he's had a little blip on the screen in the last couple of weeks of judges becoming more assertive. Unfortunately, Republicans going their way out of Congress becoming more assertive, a little bit more assertive still. a narcissist, and he's been putting his hands on all these monuments because he wants to have a permanence in Washington recovery. And when you look at the Kennedy Center specifically, every president who has served didn't get monuments named to them for them until they were out of office. And if for Washington, to Lincoln, to FDR, to Reagan, the consequential presidents, whether you agree with them in the specifics of what they did, I think they felt they were building something better and that they were serving the American people. None of that interests Donald Trump. What interests Donald Trump coming into office is what could he take out of it? How could he pad his ego and how could he pad his quality? And in the Kennedy Center, it is such a overt, like many recent things, but this particular act is such an overt effort on his part to associate himself with a president who served in a war. Donald Trump actively sought, I think, 5 in all deferrals, so he didn't have to fill you down. And the president who died in the service of his country, Donald Trump, would never die in the service of anyone else, ever. But he wants to be associated with that, and now he's been denied that, and he's doing what Powell did. He's lashing out because he can't control the outcome.
What opportunity? Someone said, you should broadcast the removal of his name from the. That there's already such a pent-up desire to see the legal defeat restore some of these institutions. It feels like we're not at that part of the story yet. He still, to me, represents a pretty grave threat for democracy. How do you view these legal defeats or legal setbacks?
Oh, absolutely, he's a threat. I mean, we are as a country in a zone of danger right now. Let's make no mistake. But at the same time, Donald Trump is a very weak and fragile person. It's why he projects strength all the time. It's why he wants to build all these monuments. It's what weak and fragile people. You're not strong and confident if you need all these tangible illustrations of your power, right? When you're in the military, the toughest, strongest, most competent soldiers are usually the quiet ones, the quiet professionals. It's in fact the mantra of special operations. You don't talk about it. You don't have to pound your chest or prove anything to anybody else. So he's weak, and I think the weaker and more fragile he gets, actually the more dangerous he'll get. We need to be more vigilant. But our first step needs to be to deliver good news. The election's about contrast, governing is about contrast, and we're trying to build a coalition right now. So what we have to do, if we get in the power, if the American people give us this opportunity, is to show that we are going to be relentlessly focused on their needs. Let's lower costs. Let's end this reckless war in Iran. Let's actually protect our military and our service members. Let's work towards balancing the budget. And that will speak stronger than anything else that will lose the name of Donald Trump. Although we will do that.
You do that like on a weekend. Claire, what opportunities do you see right now for Democrats?
Oh, I think there's a lot. Yeah. Everybody needs to stay focused on what Jason just referred to. Yeah. And what we talked about at the top of the hour. We need to do what Ossoff did in that speech. It has to be about you, not about the Democrats. Frankly, the Democrats aren't very, neither party is very popular.
For totally different reasons, though, right?
No, I think for totally different reasons, but also for the same reason, and that is disconnect. Right. Most people are not paying close attention to everything. They're just doing nothing to do. And they know they're beginning to figure out that Donald Trump is, from there, and somebody who's good at marketing and not much else. But if we don't make it about them instead of us, or even him, we will make a big mistake. And the discipline of doing that is hard. Because a lot of the base wants nothing more than red meat about how Donald Trump sucks. And so you've got to have enough discipline to stay on that message about the health insurance costs, about rural hospitals closing, about input costs for farmers.
He sucks at gas prices. How's that?
Gas prices. All of that. But if we have that discipline, I think we have an opportunity to have an election that is going to be striking in the results that could occur.
Yeah, it also feels like the debate of 8 years ago, is it democracy or the economy, feels like it has been had, and people now see that anti-democratic practices are, looking to the electorate destroying the economy.
Dead for Now. Dead for Now was the first report today about Donald Trump's slush fund. of $1.776 billion that he was planning to give to people who were convicted of crimes against the United States of America in their attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021 to try to overturn a presidential election for Donald Trump, to try to kill police officers on their way to doing that, and to try to kill the Vice President of the United States while they were at it. Donald Trump wanted those people to get money from the federal government. And now, dead for now. Dead for now. For Donald Trump's criminal insurgency that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Dead for now are the words of
I'll be right back. Gonna grab some coffee.
Who told Mark Caputo at Axios, it's dead for now. But for the Democrats in Congress opposing the Trump slush fund, it is not dead enough. And very much to Donald Trump's surprise, I'm sure. In fact, I'm sure he doesn't realize this even now. It is not dead enough for Donald Trump either. It's still alive enough to cause Donald Trump serious legal problems now of his own. Because the incompetent things around Donald Trump who call themselves lawyers in the Trump Justice Department and in the White House and the lawyers who represent Donald Trump personally, because they have appeared to have wildly outsmarted themselves in putting Donald Trump in serious legal trouble. With a federal judge, the kind of legal trouble that Donald Trump's Supreme Court did not spare him from in their decision granting Donald Trump criminal immunity for possible crimes that he might commit as president. The Supreme Court didn't foresee this situation and couldn't protect him from it. The Trump slush fund, accompanied by a Justice Department promise that the IRS will never be allowed to investigate any possible Trump tax crimes that Donald Trump and his family may have committed up to now, was the single most preposterous development in Donald Trump's litigation history, which is full of preposterous developments. And now it looks like Trump lawyers on all sides of that one went way too far. Donald Trump pushed it so far that Republicans turned against him in the House and in the Senate. And the Republican Speaker of the House reportedly told Donald Trump today that the Republican House would vote against Donald Trump's slush fund settlement if it comes to a vote in the House. And so it's dead for now, which means that Donald Trump's political power in the House of Representatives is also dead for now. Donald Trump's political power in the Senate on this issue was already known to be dead. The Senate Republican leader John Thune had said all along that the Trump slush fund was not a good idea. And as time went on, John Thune became more and more clear that he personally was against it. And then Chuck Schumer promising to bring up votes in the Senate on Donald Trump's slush fund last week. Republicans in the Senate in a private meeting attacked Donald Trump's acting attorney general, who used to be Donald Trump's corporate defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, who created the Trump slush fund. Those Republicans in the room, some of them said that it was the harshest questioning of an administration official that they have ever seen in any closed meeting in the Senate. But it's already too late for Donald Trump to easily kill the $1.776 billion political monster that he created. It's too late. Senate Majority Leader John Thune was not satisfied today with unnamed White House staffers saying it's dead for them.
So the administration they want this, that it's not coming back, so that the Republicans are skeptical that everything will be okay. Reason to perceive that will be
the ideal outcome is dead forever. There's these Republican Senate Leader John Thune said the ideal outcome is for Donald Trump to come out and officially say it is dead, not just for now, it is dead and never coming back. And while he was at it, John Thune said the other thing that is dead in the Republican United States Senate is the Trump ballroom, what Senator John Ossoff this weekend called the Jeffrey Epstein Memorial Ballroom. So no, the Trump ballroom will not be in the Republican reconciliation. John Thune saying the Republican Senate will not be voting for the $1 billion Donald Trump wants from them. For what Senator Ossoff will be calling the Jeffrey Epstein Memorial Ballroom if a vote on the Trump ballroom occurs on the floor of the Senate. Donald Trump is politically radioactive now, and Republicans in the House and Senate know it. The Republicans in the House and the Senate know that their worst enemy in the coming elections in November is Donald Trump. And Democrats in the Senate and the House have reason to believe that the enormity of Donald Trump's corruption and the corruption in his administration is getting through to voters and could be a decisive issue in November. And the problem for Donald Trump and the Republicans is that even if Donald Trump comes out right now and says the magic words that John Thune wants him to say, that the Trump slush fund is dead and dead forever, and the ballroom is dead with it, it is now beyond Donald Trump's powers to stop the investigation of his slush fund that 2 federal judges have undertaken, with one judge ordering a hearing on the subject next week on June. That is the federal judge in Virginia who last week ordered a complete stop to any and all activity involving the establishment and operating of the Trump slush fund. But the possibly more difficult legal problem for Donald Trump now is that Judge Kathleen Williams in the Southern District of Florida is using her unique power as a federal judge to investigate not just Donald Trump's lawyers at the Justice Department and Donald Trump's person, but also Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump filed his case against the Internal Revenue Service in federal court in the Southern District of Florida in the hope of getting one of those Trump-friendly Florida federal judges down there, which can happen because judges are randomly assigned. Instead, Donald Trump got Judge Kathleen Williams, who was appointed to the federal court by President Barack Obama. And last week, in response to a motion by a group of former federal judges to reopen the Trump case against the IRS to investigate the legitimacy of the so-called settlement of that lawsuit, the judge decided to do exactly that, saying that something extremely threatening to Donald Trump's acting Attorney General and to Donald Trump is possible. The judge wrote, the court is empowered to investigate serious misconduct as a collateral issue within the purview of Rule 11 and determine whether an attorney has abused the judicial process. It is very clear that attorneys abused the judicial process in this case, and so all of those attorneys are in serious trouble tonight. The judge said, under Rule 11, a court may impose sanctions on a lawyer for advocating a frivolous position, pursuing an unfounded claim, or filing a lawsuit for some improper purpose. The Trump lawyers know that a White House source simply telling Axios that it's dead for now does not get them out of trouble with this federal judge. The next line of the judge's order, Friday, is a direct threat to Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump is not a lawyer in the case who can be disciplined as a lawyer, but Donald Trump is a party to the case. He is the party in the case. He is the party who actually brought the case against the Internal Revenue Service, giving the case the title Donald J. Trump versus Internal Revenue Service. And about Donald J. Trump, the judge wrote this: a party's decision to file a frivolous lawsuit for the sole purpose of forcing a settlement may qualify as such an improper abuse. If a party files a lawsuit for an improper purpose, the court may impose an appropriate sanction on the responsible party. So here is a federal judge who now has the power, depending on the outcome of the investigation, to impose a penalty on Donald Trump for doing all of this. The judge gave Donald Trump June 12th, next week, to answer this question in writing, quote, of whether the case should be reopened because the court was the victim of a fraud. Former federal prosecutor Barbara McQuaid will join us later in this hour to consider what's coming from Donald Trump in court because of the legally perverse and obviously indefensible so-called settlement Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer forced the Justice Department to make with his former criminal client. The sting of it all has reached the point where Senator John Ossoff this weekend referred to the whole complex of Trump corruption as the Mar-a-Lago Mafia. And it is too late for someone in the White House to simply declare Donald Trump's slush fund dead for now. It's too late for Donald Trump to reverse the overwhelming image of corruption on a previously unimaginable scale in the presidency.
Hey, you remember this little guy? His name is Greg Bovino. He led Donald Trump's chaotic, violent, inept paramilitary invasions of multiple U.S. cities until he was fired a couple of months ago. Mr. Bovino has been spending his retirement lamenting that he was not able to achieve his personal dream of deporting nearly a third of the U.S. population. He's also posted photos like this one on social media. He posted that on social media. Just before jetting off to a white supremacist conference in Portugal this weekend. He was the special guest at a gathering of European far right politicians and activists who advocate for making Europe more white. Bovino appeared before a giant photo of himself in the 1930s German-style greatcoat he apparently made for himself to wear on the job. He told the assembled fascists in Portugal that the United States and Europe have, quote, the same problems and the same solutions. Last fall, when that tiny terror was leading the Trump administration's attack on Chicago, Trump's federal prosecutors, you might remember, they charged a local Chicago man, a Chicago carpenter, with plotting to kill Greg Bovino. Trump's DOJ said that this man had put out a hit on Greg Bovino, had offered cash to anybody who would kill him. Bovino said it was just more evidence of how terrible things are in terrible Chicago. He called the city a war zone. But, you know, interestingly enough, that case immediately fell completely apart. After multiple court rulings, the prosecutors were trying to say stuff in court about the defendant that they had no evidence to back up. The jury in the case proceeded to acquit the defendant in less than 3 hours. That pitiful, failed case was run out of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois in Chicago. The case just fell apart completely, which is important to know because everything is falling apart in that particular U.S. Attorney's Office right now. At the center of the collapse is the office's case against the so-called Broadview Six. Federal prosecutors initially indicted 6 people for protesting outside the ICE facility in Broadview, Illinois. They charged them with felony conspiracy. But then things started going wrong quickly. They dropped the charges quickly against 2 of the defendants. Then they pared back some of the charges against the remaining 4. That made defense attorneys start to wonder what was going on. Defense attorneys demanded to see the grand jury transcripts, which would show how prosecutors got a grand jury to indict these defendants in the first place. Rather than turn over those transcripts, the U.S. Attorney's Office instead just dropped the remaining felony charge altogether, saying, okay, now you don't need to see the grand jury stuff, right? The defense attorneys at that point could have just celebrated having all the charges dropped, but they decided they really wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on. The judge eventually agreed with the defense attorney's requests, and she ordered prosecutors to hand over the grand jury transcripts. It was quickly clear why they'd been trying to keep them hidden. Upon reviewing those transcripts, the judge said, quote, I have read hundreds, if not thousands, of grand jury transcripts. I have never seen the types of prosecutorial behavior before a grand jury that I saw in those transcripts. She accused the U.S. Attorney's Office not just of all that misbehavior, but of trying to hide that misbehavior from her by initially giving her a redacted version of the transcripts that hid the worst stuff that they had done. Well, upon getting dressed down by the judge that way, the U.S. Attorney's Office then dropped all the charges, all the felonies, all the misdemeanors. And the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in that city has been flailing ever since, saying he wasn't personally aware of any of the misconduct, saying he took action as soon as he heard about it. He's announcing sweeping new reforms to his office. But against his denials, one of the Broadview 6 defense attorneys, a man named Chris Parenti, says the U.S. attorney himself is a big part of the problem here. Parenti accuses the U.S. attorney of having had contact with the grand jurors himself. If true, that's basically a catastrophe for that federal prosecutor's office. The U.S. Justice Department under Donald Trump has cratered. It's basically gone. But in Chicago specifically, what's going on there right now could result in potentially one of the biggest federal prosecution scandals ever in the history of this country. And that's saying something for Chicago specifically, let alone for the country, but I mean it, for the whole country. Joining us now is Chris Parenti, attorney for one of the Broadview 6, former federal prosecutor himself. Mr. Parenti, I really appreciate you making time to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Rachel.
So this case is not over, despite the fact that all the charges against your client and all his co-defendants have been dismissed. You're continuing to push on this issue of alleged misconduct by the federal prosecutors here. The judge says she's going to entertain briefings on whether this was a vindictive prosecution. What should we expect to keep happening here, and why are you still pushing?
We're still pushing, Rachel, because, again, the government picked the wrong 6 people here to go after, right? These are 6 people who were out there at that Broadview facility protesting for the rights of the undocumented that were being abused by our government. So they were willing to risk their own finances, their own freedom to fight for those people, and they are willing to see this through into the end because they realize how important this case is, right? What this case has done is it allowed us to see what goes on in secret inside these grand jury rooms. Over the
You even
past
want to
week
go
or
with
two,
this?
I heard Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche on these
I
news
can make
shows
my
telling people,
potatoes
hey,
here.
It might look like DOJ's, returning
And
political
cotton,
indictments
too.
against Mr. Comey and Don Lemon and the Southern Poverty Law Center. But don't worry, it's not us. It's the grand jury, right? That's the official word here. But if
You have to
his
buy
prosecutors
seeds.
are corrupting that grand jury process, and I can assure you they
And
are because
herbicide.
we've seen these transcripts, then all of that falls away, right? Because then you can't. The grand jury is just being bulldozed by federal prosecutors who are acting in an unethical way, and the behavior that
wait
we
on
saw
it.
in our
I'll
grand
just
jury
sit on it for a while.
it's appalling. As a former federal prosecutor, I've never seen anything like this. The federal prosecutor went in there and personally vouched for the indictment. She threw out grand jurers who voiced dissent, right? That's one way to get an indictment. No, you don't like it, then get out of the room. And she had contact with the grand jury outside of the grand jury room, which you can't do. So if that's what they're doing to get these cases, these political cases, and the Broadview 6 case was a political case, and we're convinced it was directed from the White House or the Trump administration, if they're willing to have prosecutors act in such an unethical way in a room where there is nobody, there's no judge, there's no defense attorney, it is built on trust that the Department of Justice will have its prosecutors do the right thing. If that trust erodes, then the whole system collapses. And that's why all 6 defendants in the Broadview 6 case are willing to continue to push this fight forward because they want the sunlight to expose what this Department of Justice is having their prosecutors do behind closed doors.
I'm really glad that you explained it that way. I feel like it's part of the reason that I've been so interested in this case and in the other cases where misconduct before the grand jury has been alleged. I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me like us non-lawyers in the country really need to get our heads around this particular problem, because if they are lying to the grand jury, if they are engaging in misconduct before the grand jury, what that means in non-legalese is that they can bring criminal cases, they can bring charges, they can potentially arrest and jail people on the basis of nothing. And they can do it to all of their political opponents, to whole classes of people. If the grand jury system falls apart because they are abusing it, because they are behaving behind closed doors in ways that aren't what they're supposed to be doing under the judicial system, it really kicks the door wide open to mass arrests of their political opponents. Now, the judge acceding to your request to look at these grand jury transcripts, recognizing and being so stern with the U.S. Attorney's Office here after what they did, what kind of penalties are possible here? What kind of punishment is possible here? How can this U.S. Attorney's Office, how can any of these prosecutors' offices be sort of brought back under the right side of the law if judges decide to do that?
Yeah, we are hopeful. I mean, this judge was deceived by the U.S. Attorney's Office for 7 months. I agree with this. She's angry, right? For 7 months. And keep in mind, she came out of that office as ideas, right? And I think she didn't see it because you don't want to see it. You want to believe that that U.S. Attorney's Office, the Chicago U.S. Attorney's Office, which is known around the country as being one of the preeminent offices in this country, you don't want to see that they're doing things the wrong way, or they're putting, not just their finger on their scale, but their entire body on the scale for this one, right? And you don't want to see that. And now that at the end of this, right, she saw it, right, and the government tried to hide it. They were ordered to turn over transcripts, and what they did is they redacted certain parts and they removed pages, right? You would never do that with something that's only going to the court, right? You redact things that are going to public docket, social security numbers, birthdays, names, things that are just going to a judge in her chambers. You would redact that. But someone in that office, and maybe more than one person, sat down and literally crossed out all of this misbehavior that I just described for you that occurred there and took out pages and didn't tell the court. So, everyone is thinking that the office is acting with that presumption of regularity that the department is usually entitled to. But as we try to argue in court, Judge, that's wrong. It's not just for what's happened in Chicago. You see it across the country. This Department of Justice has mailed it in on doing things the right way. And now it's time for judges like her and judges across the country to say, I'm not going to allow this. We have now seen what you're doing behind closed doors, and the American people need to see it, because if you're doing it here in Chicago, I guarantee you're doing it in every other office, because they're getting pressure to put through these indictments that no grand jury, if you didn't put your finger on the scale, would indict. And keep in mind, in our case, the grand jury voted no, and it shows how relentless this department is. Even when the grand jury, who almost never says no, voted no against this indictment, they went back the next week and engaged in more misconduct to get this across the finish line. That's the scary part.
Yeah, and judges around the country, in Chicago and around the country, sort of getting up on their hind legs and saying no to this, exposing it, acknowledging that it's happening, and saying we're going to put a stop to it, could be, I think, a whole new phase in Trumpism and in what this administration is doing and even tries to do. Chris Parenti, former federal prosecutor, attorney for one of the Broadview Six. Mr. Parenti, thank you so much for your time. Please keep us surprised. We'd love to have you back.
Will do. Thank you, Rich.
All right, let's talk to Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He serves on the Foreign Relations and Appropriations Committees, also the author of the new book, Crisis of the Common Good, The Fight for Meaning and Connection in a Broken America. I want to get to the book in a moment, but let us start with this anti-weaponization fund. A couple things happening right now. Senator Jackie Rosen said she's going to introduce bills to redirect the money for this fund towards SNAP, Medicaid, and public safety programs. There's another attempt at 6 p.m. today by Senator Schiff, Kelly, and Slotkin to block this fund. What do you want to do?
Well, I think the fund is illegal. I don't think it's going to be able to go forward, but we clearly have the chance to put Republicans on record. As you know, they want to pass this big immigration funding bill. That bill is open for amendments, and we're definitely going to have several amendments to block this fund from going forward. The courts are probably going to weigh in increasingly definitively here. The President of the United States cannot just reach his hands into the Treasury and scoop out $1.8 billion to pay off police beaters, but we'll double up on those legal efforts and put Republicans on the record. I don't know that they want to vote in favor of this, because this has captured the country's attention in a way that some of his other corruption schemes haven't. People get this and they know how deeply immoral it is.
Why do you think they get it?
I think because it's happening right at the same time that these prices are going up and up and up, and they're all being caused by Donald Trump. And so I think people are like, right now, as they go to fill their gas tanks up, saying to themselves, like, wait a second, it seems like the only thing he's working on are schemes to enrich himself or to support himself politically. He's doing nothing to end the war in Iran. He's doing nothing about gas prices. So this one's pretty simple to understand, just giving himself your taxpayer dollars, but it also happens at a time when people think he should be working on problems that they're facing.
So you're going to have the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in front of you tomorrow. You're going to see him twice, talking about the war, both in foreign relations and appropriations. The president is really confusing about where we are with this war. Today he said, I don't care. I couldn't care less about the idea of negotiations falling apart 42 minutes later, after this CNBC interview where he said that, he posts this on his Truth Social. Talks are continuing at a rapid pace with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Is this intentional for him to be all over the place? Is it a negotiating tactic? What is your sense as a person on foreign relations about what exactly is going on?
Well, I'm sure it's definitely not a negotiating tactic. I mean, this is a guy who's kind of losing his mind, and he's barely awake during the day. He is obsessive over the ballroom. He's not spending any time trying to end the war. They have no plan to end the war because they basically made a bet at the beginning of the war. Netanyahu and a handful of Iran hawks convinced them that if they bombed Iran for a couple of days, the regime would fall and some pro-America, pro-Israel regime would take its place. That's what they thought was going to happen. And when that didn't happen, they literally had no plan B. And so that's why they are fumbling. That's what we need to find out tomorrow. Like, what is the plan? Is there any chance this war is ending anytime soon, or are we going to be sitting on $9 a gallon gasoline this fall? So far, it appears they have no plan. It feels like they went into the war with no plan. Donald Trump is just not engaged on a daily basis, and hopefully we will be able to articulate how they're going to get out of this war, but I don't think he is, because I don't think they have any idea how to get that done.
What should happen? I mean, we've already bombed Iran. The goal was to get a regime change. It didn't happen. The goal was to stop their ability to produce enriched uranium. Maybe that's happened for a moment. Who knows how long? But they haven't got to a settlement on that. And to stop the missile program and to stop the proxies. Can Donald Trump really achieve those through a negotiation? Or are we at a point where we have to continue this war? What is your best assessment of what to do next?
Well, neither a war nor a negotiation will get what Donald Trump wants. And that is just the reality. Why? Because these guys are incompetent. It is like you have fifth graders running your national security policy. So no, Iran is now more powerful than ever. They took America's best shot and they survived. They have additional leverage because they control the strait. So a negotiation is not going to get you anything better than Obama's deal. The war is not going to stop Iran's nuclear program or their missile program or their drone program. So the solution here is simple. Donald Trump has to announce that we are permanently stopping military operations, and after he does that, Iran will likely reopen the strait, and we will at least have a chance to have gas prices come down. But the two paths you mentioned, starting to bomb again, doesn't get you anywhere.
We're going to be paying a toll, though, right? So does that mean gas prices are going to stay up because of the toll that's going to get put on, likely on these ships?
Right, there's no, I mean, listen, this is kind of like breaking
I have to take a little break. It's kind of a short stream.
What your plan is to put it back together.
I'm not feeling 100%. So it's 1819 February 2nd.
Scenario right now
first year
step out of the way and probably allow for the Gulf states or the Europeans to come in and try to put it back together, to try to negotiate.
Farming Simulator 22, Silverrun, Forrest, Woody Johnson Farm Park 14.
After day after day. You know, it's kind of like if your kid.
Thanks for watching. We'll see y'all later. Y'all take care.